righty, it is, what are we thinking, 6:07 p.m. on July the 10th, 2025. This is the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I'm calling to order. Okay, let's do the roll call. Dorothy Hill.
Kenny Burke.
Neil Murray.
Joshua Saunders.
Okay, and then we have Luke Murray here as our staff liaison. Okay. Approval of minutes. Everybody get a chance to take a look at the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Okay, correspondence and public comment. I reached out to the folks at Green Hill kind of late today, but I just wanted to find out how they were faring with everything. Have you heard anything back from the folks at Green Hill Beach Road, Luke? No? Okay.
No, I have not. I haven't spoken to the chief about it, but as far as I know, we were working on we had just deposited funds from end of year into a fund for these types of things. And so I know that the speed feedback sign was ongoing and he's working on it.
Okay, great. I did go to the last school building committee meeting, and I did get a chance to just plug bike pedestrian issues, and they took note of that and specifically asked if they could, in all their graphics, include a bicyclist along with the pedestrians and the cars that they have in there. So I think it's important that you have people, you see that there are people biking and to school. Safe Streets for All, with Neil's help, I think everybody had some input, and we got a template from Luke, and we sent a letter of support to the Federal Highway Administration. I sent a letter to the Economic Development Committee and the Planning Board when they had their joint meeting, just reiterating that we wanted to see them discuss bike and pedestrian issues with regard to regulations and zoning. I spoke with Faith LaBrasserie, I think her name is, from the Block Island Sound Bikeway Committee in Charlestown, and they submitted some plan to request to the Long Range Transportation Planning Office, wanting to have a light, some kind of signal, so that people could cross Route 1 somewhere along in Charlestown. And I submitted to everybody a draft. Lisa Beth and I went to the Long Range Transportation Planning meeting or public outreach in North Kingston Library a month ago. And we were encouraged to submit something, and I submitted a draft. I heard back from Liza Farr that she was going to add that, but I don't know that she has the wording in the background and everything. But I wanted everybody to have an opportunity, if you took a look at it, and Luke, I didn't want to blindside you with that. She said that it was fine to come from BPAC. This is requesting crossing on Route 1, somewhere along Route 1 on the, so that folks from the villages north in South Kingstown could then access by bike and pedestrian the beach without having, their life in their hands.
So you're sending a letter to them, or you already sent it?
I have not. I sent I sent a draft to her, not
Okay.
thinking that that this was it,
Okay.
because I wanted you
I
to
would-
take a look at it.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I do have a copy, but I haven't even had a chance to
That's
look
fine.
at it. I can talk to Rich. I mean, it's fine. We're on the same page. I don't see us misaligned on that from a town standpoint. These things, I'm just trying to think of process through the lens of other boards and commissions
Mm-hmm.
and communications just being sent directly from the boards and commissions to state agencies, right? So I have it. Why don't we talk offline
Okay.
with Rich and just make sure that we're all on the same page before it gets sent? I think it's easy.
Yeah, I just had been, at the last meeting, we talked about it. Actually, yeah, I think it was at the last meeting we talked about it, and everybody was encouraged that we should do something. And then with that escape that was submitted by one of the town council members, it kind of fit with that. So I didn't, I should probably not have sent it to Liza without going through you first. So anyway, bad. Okay, thank you. So has anybody, I'm going to turn it over if anybody has anything that they want to add to that, if they've had a chance to read it.
Well, I had a chance to read it and gave a little bit of input to just clarifying, shortening a few sentences so that I thought it read a tiny bit better, just for that purpose, because we know what we're thinking of and we had to make it bite-sized for another audience. And Luke, just to let you know, it was nothing in specifics. It was in concept, pointing out that, again, Route 1 with its design, and I appreciate the last paragraph, was very consistent to highway designing in the 1960s, where the classic example being Robert Moses in New York City, with having highways that separated neighborhoods, that isolated neighborhoods. So it was just that here's what it is. The purpose was to move traffic quickly, but it has a disrupting factor on the town as far as crossing that barrier. So nothing specific recommended when you have a chance to read it, more in spirit of give consideration to ways to connect the villages in town for bicycles and pedestrians, not everything on a highway connector. So I don't think any great issues there, and I understand the purpose of, we're an advisory committee to the town council as well, and if we need clarification that if a request comes from another agency saying you're a committee in the following town, can you, and asking for some input, perhaps if we document that, and getting clarification from the town council is what our capacities would be in general statements, not in specific commitments.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's a really good point. I think going forward, and we'll have to think about this, but maybe go into the town council in some capacity at a future meeting in general, because I'm trying to deal with this with all committees, because it's become, the biggest thing is making sure that the town administration and whoever else is on the same page when we're approaching other agencies, whether it be state or federal, right? Because it leads to mixed messages if we send a letter, and then also, but there's another letter that comes from another town committee that maybe isn't consistent with our ask. And so it leaves questions either in a funder's mind or another agency that, is everyone on the same page here? There's inconsistencies. So I think my ask would be that it just, whatever you do, keep working through us. It's not to control it. It's just to ensure that if we have issues, we can sit down and discuss them and say, here's our view on it and here's why. Because, for instance, Rich may have other projects or other things going on that you're not aware of, right? Because we do the day-to-day. We're plugged into a lot of different areas, so if there's a conflict there, we can usually talk through it and say, I know what you're saying, but you're not thinking about X, Y, and Z, and we can make sure that whatever we put out is consistent. That's the biggest thing, so there isn't confusion. But I'm not trying to restrict anybody's right in the committee's right to be able to weigh in on all this stuff. It's just making sure that we're all on the same page.
Makes perfect sense to speak with a consistent voice from different venues in the town, and we can help perhaps address gaps that might exist between state departments talking to each other as well, because you've gone to one, and would they be familiar with what DOT is talking with the city about as well, for the town?
Not to rush you, but the deadline is tomorrow on sending them.
Of course it is.
It's really, it's so basic, though. It's just, we want you to provide access. We don't even tell you how. Okay. I did talk to Rich actually a little while ago, and I just wanted to commend him on the additional sidewalks that were added on Rodman that were not really part of the plan. But Rodman has a continuation of sidewalk now all the way to the bike path. And also, what Kenny was talking about several meetings ago, from Stedman's, the bike, having a sidewalk from Stedman's that connects, and so that's been done now. And so, good job to Rich and his group. I'd let him know. Yeah. So anyway, all righty. Staff report on town activities.
Yeah, so a few things that come to the top of the list. So on Tuesday, July 15th, and Ken, you might probably aware of this, there's going to be an event from the governor's office for the Road Restore program. And that's the governor's program where they're distributing funds to municipalities with a match to do local roadways. And it was something that was born out of ARPA last year, or the year before. And it does make a difference. It helps us leverage funding to get some of our local roads done. One of those roads is actually Old North Road. So now that the development on Stony Fort has been reviewed, and I believe it's received preliminary approval, that there's no utility connections planned for that roadway. That's our understanding. So Rich is cleared to move forward with the repaving of Old North Road. The governor's office being aware of that, they wanted to have an event out there. So if you feel free to stop by at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. It's going to be my knowledge so far is that the governor's office is coordinating with Flag Road. Yep. And we'll have a machine out there or something, right? So the town manager will be out there saying a few words, probably local representatives, maybe a couple council members. Ken, I don't know if you were planning to go out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be there. There'll be one of our, I think our provost will be there to speak on behalf of the university.
Okay.
So, yep.
Good. So it should be, a good small event, but celebrate some of the small wins on some of that funding.
Where exactly on Flag Road?
At the intersection of Flag and Old North Road, in that grassy area.
Yeah. Okay, the Safe Streets for All grant, I'm trying to remember the last time we met, but it wasn't submitted yet. It is now submitted. We had quite a few letters of support from Senator Reed, Senator Whitehouse, a local delegation. I mean, we had a pretty beefy application. I think Bowman did a very good job on it. We'll wait to hear back, but I'm hopeful that, the ultimate request is for a little over $5 million. We would have to put in, I think it's 20% of that. So if we were to get the grant, so it's a substantial sum, and that includes everything from street lighting to repaving to sidewalks to RRFBs, everything we wanted to throw against the wall. So we're hopeful that the application is strong, and we'll see. Waiting to hear back. But we appreciate you putting in a letter of support as well for that effort. Everybody pitching in helps. You mentioned the school building committee. I actually had a meeting this morning, first thing, with the school building committee. We started meeting at 8:30 in the morning for summer hours. Probably the only one I missed after over 80 meetings was that last one. So, but I was aware of it. I watched it, and that topic did come up about bikes again. Kate had mentioned it. Kate had talked about, so there's definitely bike racks included on the plan. However, for e-bikes, there was a discussion about additional storage, like more of an enclosed storage unit. Kate had said, well, maybe we'll fundraise and do things later on with that. I urged the committee just to keep it on the list, because there's going to be potentially last-in money on the project, meaning that if we recapture some savings off the estimate, then we'll have some money it's going to be maintained unspent. And at the end of the project, we could go back to council, and this is kind of a policy and sort of You know, again, this would be the perfect time later on to weigh in on this issue, is to say, we feel that a good use of those funds would be to maybe purchase bike storage or enhance solutions. So, but I think that's the last money in. Obviously, we're trying to build a big building that costs a lot of money. We don't have the estimates in yet, so right now our focus is more on getting that structure done and all the supporting site elements. But it's on the list. I'm going to continue to advocate for that, as well as Kate. I know she's committed to that. But we will have some provisions for the bike storage. The principals indicated there's not a lot of bike riders, although Kate made a good point that with e-bikes, we're seeing a larger trend back into that direction. So we'll see what happens. And I don't know if you had any other comments on the bike or any other questions on the school building project specifically.
I think the only thing was, and it's not the building itself, but it was the roadway, just School Street, that the sidewalk be wider or that the sidewalk be repaired. And I think, Kenny, do you have some comments?
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy. Just following up on your comment, I think if you looked at the mass balance of students that go to school, that drive to school, the school building committee hasn't accommodated all of them. They know that there's parking, active parking on Kingstown Road, which is fine. So I think, again, being financially constrained, you can't do everything all at once, but just acknowledging that that condition exists, likely will exist into the future. That connector on School Street is important. The sidewalks don't meet current ADA standards. They don't have ramps that meet current standards. They're not wide enough. Some of the panels are lifted up. And again, it's like, what is a school building responsibility? What is town responsibility? All that stuff gets put into categories, and it's the nice to have. And you got to build a school first before you can start worrying about all those other problems. So definitely School Street, the linkages to all the surplus parking that the school building committee absolutely took into account when they sized the building and the site, the parking lot. The fact that the school has an active policy compelling students within, I think it's a mile radius, to walk or ride to school. It's important. You can't do all the sidewalks, but you can at least think about when Rich is ready to do Columbia Street, trying to have sharrows and trying to have other low to no costs ideas to slow traffic down, make things safer for everybody. So,
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. It is a town responsibility, unfortunately. I'd like to put it on the school project, but being ride reimbursed and whatnot, we're kind of limited to the site. But that said, and I've said this before, it's coming. I think right now we're so busy. The schedule, I will tell you, for the school project is a matter of being on schedule and off schedule is a matter of days. So we're threading a needle on trying to get this thing move forward. Once we get shovels in the ground on the school building and we're more focused kind of on Curtis Corner and some other things, my plan is to convene internally and bring in external players into a planning process more for the area in general, to your point, Ken, and start looking at the entire pie. Because we'll have a couple of years while the school's in construction, we can then refocus and say, all right, how are we going to make these connections? And everything's going to cost money. So, but at least if we identify things like that, like ADA connections and whatnot, we can start looking at the capital plan and prioritizing, okay, we need to do this section of sidewalk this year, maybe do this sidewalk next year. We know School Street and Columbia came up, that wide intersection's an issue that we need to address. So there's a myriad of things that we'll be looking at. So stay tuned, it's coming, but it's just right now, all hands on deck on the school facility itself. All right, and then
One more,
go ahead.
one
Yep.
question here too. With the 108, the work being done on 108 right now, the paving and such that's coming, and I know there was this comment, it looks like it's at Church Street that they're putting the RRFB. It's not at School Street. There, you can see what look like the bolts in the ground, and I'm assuming it's for that to be placed there for the students to access Old Mountain Field.
I believe you're right. I'd have to go back to the plans. It's been a while since I've taken a look at them, but I believe you're correct. I mean, they're rapidly finishing up their work, so you're going to find out really, really soon. Yeah, it's been milled. So, and I was told by Rich that they're planning on paving within the next few weeks. So, all that work is happening. I think Lynch has that contract too, and Lynch has contracts up at URI as well. So, they're moving pretty quick through the area, paving a lot of roads. That was actually my next item is, you know, with 108 and Kingstown Road, we're paving roads, Old North Road. What else do we have? 138 is set to be paved in the next couple of weeks. So Rich has informed me that within the next 2 weeks, that patch is going to go away and we're repaving curb to curb. So there's, for better, for worse, there's going to be a lot of detours, but it's going to go quickly. And then I think a lot of our pain points with regards to complaints on roads will be done. That doesn't mean that pedestrian issues are going to be taken care of. That takes care of the paving, but it's a step in the right direction, so.
Yeah, my focus was just on the pedestrian crossing there, the clarification that it is at Church Street. And I see the bolts in the ground, so clearly that would be where something electric is going to be attached, and I expect that's where the beacon will be.
Okay. I don't think I have anything else of specific unless you have questions on something. I don't want to belabor, I don't take up all your airwaves tonight, so.
I have a question as we're, so the Main Street, if we get the implementation grant, the first step would be design, okay? I have a question on the work that is proposed that'll go, I think it's a bike path or a path that will go from the bike path behind the little choo-choo loo, and through Wakefield Elementary School, right? Is there supposed to be a linkage there that?
There already is a linkage into the school property behind, so you're talking about building a separate one through the parking lot?
Well, it's not paved. I'm talking about from the bike path, when you come down the bike path, before you hit Main Street, there's some fencing there with a gap. And you ride your bike through there, past the little garden.
Yeah.
And
so
then
we're on the
you
same
get
page.
over to the little crossing, the bridge.
Yep.
And I believe that that's going to be paved. Is that not part of the?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
There's no plans for that.
Okay.
That property right now is actually still under the school department.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, happenstance, and it's a good time to bring it up, it's on the school committee agenda for next week to transfer that property to the town. It's been cleaned out. So that will be coming to the town. However, our focus will be trying to maintain it because it's getting broken into weekly now. And trying to do that. But I'm not aware of any. That's part of, as you know, on the affordable housing sort of plan right now. I don't know where that's going to land and whether that's going to land as affordable housing or not. I think this is additional planning that needs to be done. So the shorter answer is I don't know. It's not part of the Main Street project. The Main Street project's primarily relegated to the roadway itself and any connections surrounding it, you know.
The reason that I bring it up is that when you ride your bike to Main Street and then you want to go down towards Calf Bar or Muse, you have to ride on the road. And that would, if that was paved behind there, then there'd be an off-road option. That's all.
Yeah, I think, so the way, if we were to get the money, fingers crossed, right, that money has to flow through the town. And my understanding is that it would be more of a town-driven project as opposed, because I had to contact Bob Rocchio at the state and get a letter of support from them that they would allow us to essentially work on that roadway. So it would be kind of an atypical situation where the town would be more in the driver's seat on the design docs, and the state would be more the reviewing agency saying yes, no. And then, so we have an opportunity there. Unfortunately, unlike, I went through New London a while ago, and New London on their Main Street has parking on the interior, and then they have a bike lane, then they have the sidewalk. We just don't have that width. So I think it'll be up to the design team to figure out what opportunities exist for enhanced bicycle and pedestrian access along that roadway. So, but we're a ways from there because we don't have a dime in our pocket yet, so to speak. So we're hoping that that'll come through.
Okay, that was the only thing I had. I just, back in my mind, I thought that the Parks and Rec that was one of their items on the CIP, that they had that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, I would have to check, and I don't think it was, but Saugatucket Park had a master plan done, but I don't believe that was part of the master plan because it wasn't technically our property, and there's kind of a fuzzy line there because of the school, so, but I can check with Terry Murphy on that.
Dorothy, just one point I wanted to make. I re-reviewed the letter of recommendation that we had there. One thing wasn't included that I thought we might, which was bicycle amenities. Because right now you may be able to have a bicycle, but where can you park it? The rest station there has very limited, and if you're going along Main Street, we just want to make sure that we have some sort of bike rack parking included in the concept when it comes. Aside from that, you're going up behind the, the well block building, the parking lot up there, where they have some bike racks right against the bike path. But again, designed to come, and I assume we'll provide input when that comes along, successful, if they're successful.
I don't have any more questions. That's good. Okay. I had, for old business, the review of state road projects. So last month, you provided the town's request for 138. And I know that we will have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And I think everything that you said pretty much is supported by BPAC. But I wanted us to have an opportunity to look at it after we've heard from you and we've gotten your document. If there were little tweaks or things that we thought when we provide our letter of support, which you had requested we do, and I think you said by the end of August or September, because they haven't picked a team yet. I think I had in my notes that it was, we should submit our recommendation or request by the end of August.
Yeah, that's correct. So just to clarify, because Ken, I don't think you were at the last meeting, right? So I just want to make clear though, and I'm not trying to be defensive on it, but we walked through those aerials for like 2 hours. Yes. And I pointed out everything I was going to recommend. So just for the record. So my assumption going into that was you were all on board with what I was going to send in, because that's exactly what I did send in, was everything we talked about, right? I'm fine if you guys have other recommendations. I just want to make sure, again, we're on the same page, because I was under the impression that night, like I had to get it in on a time frame, so that's why I reviewed it all with you. As far as other things, we can certainly put that in. But just to be clear, the design's not done yet, right? And Ken was in on the same meeting I was. This was to fuel a scope to get the design build team on board, and it is correct that they were talking by the end of the year, they were hoping to get a design team on board for design starting beginning of next year. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong. Does that sound about right?
You're correct.
Okay, so definitely weigh in any way you want, but I just don't want to set the expectation. We're still going to, there's a whole nother design, I would expect, that will have some involvement in the design process once they actually get the design team in place. However, it's clear to me that they want to get moving on this, so I think the key is to make sure that we're there at the right time and don't fall asleep at the wheel, because I get this feeling that they're going to steamroll. I don't know if that's the feeling you got, but it definitely felt like that's why they wanted a design build type project. They want to get it designed and then roll right into construction. And the bridge is the first thing they're going to start working on, so I think that's part of it too. So, and Ken, feel free to.
Yeah, no, I don't need to retread that. That makes sense. And again, if it wasn't said at one of the last BPAC meetings, we did hear from Kingston Water District as soon as the town, the university, we finished paving 138. Kingston Water is going to come back and replace their water line from Ministerial Road all the way up the hill to their water tank. So, yeah, we'll enjoy the new pavement for probably just under a year, and then it'll get torn up again. I'm a Kingston Water District member. I think you are as well. I went to that special meeting, so the general manager made that notice. And I think this goes to support the fact that DOT is very likely going to not do the roadway improvements for a while. They're going to focus on the bridges, and more than likely, I mean, depending on what they decide, but they're probably not going to do the surface treatments, any sidewalks or any crosswalks, the paving for several years. They've got to get through the bridges first.
Are you speaking about the bridge over the railroad tracks?
There's 4 bridges, Chickasha, Chapuxet, Whitehorn Bridge, Whitehorn Brook, and Amtrak. So 4 bridges are being replaced.
Okay, so I think at the last meeting, we had talked about providing input and providing a letter or something that said that we support your recommendation. You had asked that we do that.
Yeah.
And then,
You know,
Okay.
I would still encourage you to do that. This is really just set the expectation, and I think to Ken's point, like, this is a first step in the process, so I just don't want you to think like you're gonna send that in and then that's it. Like, that's just to get our foot in the door on the input, and then there's still more to come.
This is a case of being consistent on messaging, as you mentioned earlier from the committee. So having seen the full review and gone basically foot by foot along the plan before we've seen it, it sounds like we agreed with everything that was presented at that point in time. I don't know that we would want to send in recommendations to tweak that at this point in time, because some of those recommendations, I'm glad to hear about all 4 bridges being addressed, because some of our recommendations were, how are we going to deal with sidewalks for pedestrians and for bicyclists at the bridge points, and to hear that they're being addressed, and we have recommendations in to please widen and make it more accessible is a good start for the first step in the process of getting those bridges done. And if you're saying this is going to be a multi-year project in the design, will the town have input into the design when it comes and see the recommendations, or is that an unknown at this point?
We typically have input, but like I said, we're often given a preliminary plan, and it's like, what do you think? So I think the key is that we have everything teed up on what our thoughts are. Ideally, we're brought to the table early, and that's the case, but I will tell you that that's not always the case. But I do expect we'll have an opportunity to weigh in, and I think the more that groups such as yourself weigh in behind us and say, no, this stuff is important, it's a requirement, not an option, I think will bode better.
Would the recommendation go to Anthony Mako, the project manager at RIDOT, as well?
Yes.
yeah, I remember that we talked about, and I think maybe because Ken wasn't here as well, that we were going to have a workshop and take a look at it. And then we talked about perhaps having hosting some kind of public, I don't want to say forum, but something where we would get input from the community. We were going to invite.
I don't remember that specifically. I do remember talking in general terms about when the time came that, but I also caution this, and I'm just putting it out there. We, as Ken knows, we had a whole Route 138 committee. And I think some of what tabled that project was because, at some point RIDOT, and I don't know the details of it, but RIDOT kind of said, we're going to move on. So there's always we want to have input. We want to try to be as strong as possible. We also want to get the roadway done. So there's going to be a thread the needle there that has to be done. I think you or I coming to the table, town coming to the table, we can get a lot of what we want, but whether we get it all, I don't know. As far as workshops, I think we're going to have to determine that at a time based on what RIDOT's sort of tempo is. Because they're not required by law to do anything. It's their roadway. They can, as long as they're compliant with their own rules and regulations, as far as I know, there's no requirement that they bring us to the table. Now, it's good practice because all our roads tie into it. But unless we have a technical aspect where we're like, this doesn't work, it's sometimes tough for us to leverage the other things. So we try to play nice in the sandbox because there's also things that DOT wants as well. Things like governor events and on Flag Road, right, Ken?
Okay, so I did prepare a project review recommendation memo, just like we had it with ARPA, on all the ARPA. I know these guys don't know, but for each of the ARPA projects, we looked through and made our own recommendations. So all I did here was, and I'll share it with everybody, and they can add what they want to just the text here, where I just talk about the proximity to all the different, to businesses, to public transportation, to recreational opportunities, to future projects, to schools and historic districts. But basically, I said that the project area with enhancements to pedestrian bicyclist safety has the potential to connect residents and visitors to amenities well beyond the scope of the project. So, and that was kind of the point that I wanted to make from our group, is that when you think about the 138 corridor, people are coming from different areas, and if it's safe to walk or bike to West Kingston Park from West Kingston Elementary School, that's a good thing, you know. And what your plan, your recommendations take that into account. So I think we could probably just make a motion to fully support what South Kingstown has already recommended or requested, unless somebody has anything that they want to add to that.
What is this? Are we specifically talking about 138? Okay. And I know Luke had already affirmed that he's already communicated with DOT, so that ship is kind of sailed. But then we have this body of work, which is more voluminous. So which are we seeking endorsement of? What's already gone out to DOT or the BPAC stuff?
Well, we just discussed, perhaps nobody had any additional changes or tweaks or anything, or do we? Is there anything that we wanted to request beyond what the town has requested?
In order to honor the work that you guys did when I wasn't there, I'm not going to make any suggestions. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, there are things like, you know, you want a four-way stop at fairgrounds and you want sidewalks on both sides. There are some, I'm going into like design mode, so I'm going to restrict myself from doing that at this meeting because I don't think it's necessary. I support what you guys have already compiled, and I think we're on track to get notified from Luke when DOT selects a crew and what means of additional communication they're wanting. So I support everything that you've already done. I do have a ton of comments, but I'd rather not muddy the waters. I think you guys have some great comments.
Just, you know, I'm always open to comments, by the way. So if you know, you read through the memo, and I made some just, you know, overlays on the aerials of where I thought things should be, and we had talked about, but if there's additional comments you have, feel free to push them our way as well, because we need to know, right? Again, this is about coordination of saying, okay, this makes sense, because even interfaces like, there was something comment made about, aligning Keeney with Peckham, right? That's not a town thing. I think I made a suggestion of, you know, putting that connector walkway. That's one way to address it. But the Keeney thing involves URI, because they have to move one of their roadways, you know, or we have to, Peckham, is that a town road or is that an interior?
I think it's university.
Yeah, I think that's an interior roadway
Yeah.
for the university. So that would be a university thing, because they would have to do that. So we can recommend it, but it involves other parties. So this is where it gets convoluted. I think at this point, you know, what I was looking for, just to be blunt, is you to try to back us and say to the DOT, yes, in general terms, you don't even have to get into the details. We're in support of the town memo and any additional pedestrian improvements we can lend through the future process, right? It could be very simple. But at this point, it kind of puts you backing us as a group. And then we can say, hey, it's not just the town administration saying it, like we're responding to comments from the community and the council of saying this is important. And then positioning ourselves that now. And it's one step in the process. Fair?
Fair. And so we will, I'll run this by everybody. We're not in any hurry to send this out. So I'll run this by everybody and they can add what they want to it. As far as fully supporting the staff recommendations or the staff request. And then if we have tweaks or little things, we'll run them by you.
Just make a list for
Right.
us, and when the time is right for us to comment, we
Okay.
bring those forward.
Okay, how does that sound?
It sounds good to me. Again, we keep it the general support memo to the state. I like that you have the details, the concepts regarding the schools and such and the connectivity. I would recommend that that message be conveyed to the town council. And therefore, it's documented at that point. And Luke, you could see those communications and any tweaks as well will run by you and include in there with recommendations. So that's in-house from the advisory committee to the town council to document the thoughts. But the general support letter going to the state, as we say, recognizes this is out and it's there, and we're not sending a conflicting message for them to look at one more thing to include. But when the design time comes, we've documented for the town and others points to be considered.
You are fully, you know, your main goal is advisory to council. I always say that. So if you want to write a communication to council, advising that, like, this is on your radar, we're in support, and we want to be helpful, and whatever you want to say. Yeah, certainly.
So I will send this draft to you guys, and then they will send comments through you, or we can
We'll
work
figure it
on
out. If you want to send comments to me, and then we'll chat, and that way, you know,
Okay.
I would just ask if you have bullet points or if you have a markup, just
Right.
send it over, and then I'll aggregate them, send them over, and you can finish it up.
Okay.
Fair
Okay.
enough?
Okay, so I'll take care of that and then send it out to everybody.
And I just wanted to mention regarding the Pike and Farm signal, so I was, the university was notified that the State Traffic Commission is going to take that issue up again the end of the month. So I and our campus designer likely will go to that meeting to advocate for that four-way intersection, just for awareness.
Okay, so I think we've hit old business A, and we also talked about 108. We don't really have the answer to when they will, finish that area on Kingston Road across from Old Mountain Field, but Town Manager Manny had specifically said that the crosswalks would look different, not necessarily raised or textured, but that he was looking out for the pedestrians and safety, so.
And if I could, Dorothy, I think I may have mentioned this before, if somebody could just, let DOT's paving contractor know that they do have a bird bath on that first little bump out, kind of across from School Street. There isn't a drainage grate on that. I guess it's the south side of that first little bump out. It's a flat spot. Yeah, I mean, they can get really crafty and put a feather in a couple inches of asphalt here and there and get water to flow. The point being that if it ponds up during, cold weather, that could be a safety hazard. But I'm sure they're aware of that.
Okay, I had received an email from, let's see. Well, I didn't forward it on. David and Marianne Smith, Rosemary Smith from Narragansett had sent out. They have been working forever on getting the bike path to continue from Narragansett to Narragansett Beach. They had been to I guess DOT had a STIP public forum I didn't know about, and it's today. So they were going to that to talk about their hopes and plans for that. But I'll send if I haven't already, I'll send the email to everybody, but any way that we can, BPAC can support them, because it really, I'm down that bike path and I go all the way to Narragansett Beach, and it would be nice not to have to go on the road. So I think there's a lot of SK people who would appreciate something being done there.
Is that going out of our boundaries to talk about the development in another town, or do we do it as post it and people can write on their own to support it? Because
Absolutely.
are we still on old business items, or are we through on that?
Okay, new business items. We talked, I guess, last week about the Wakefield Village Association, and does anybody want to be kind of a liaison to their meetings, and just so we can kind of know if they need help with anything? I think you had suggested that we collaborate with the Village Association on something or other.
When are their meetings?
I think it's once a month on the Thursdays. I actually just attended one. I was trying to remember when it was. Let me see if I can.
I remember speaking to someone and it was conflicting with some of my schedule, but I'm not certain. I don't remember when exactly it was.
I would be interested in being an alternate, kind of like more of a technical person, but not the lead.
If it doesn't conflict with my current schedule, I wouldn't mind being the lead.
I know they have a website I'm just looking at. When their meetings are. I can get it. I do attend the meetings now. I'm pretty regularly able to attend. I had suggested, because they're pretty active right now, I actually donated my own personal time to build planter hooks for the bridge and installed those at the last second before the river fire.
Great job. They look
Thanks.
wonderful.
So we Jen and I and her husband and a couple of volunteers managed to get that done. So it's a good group. With so much going on with Main Street, and they're moving a lot of the events into the park, and I think it's a good connection. It's not a large lift that people can make it. They do have, typically I think it's like 9 o'clock meetings, 8:30, 9 o'clock, for about an hour and a half. So they're more focused now, and Ken, you were on there before, right? They're a little bit more focused on programming now, and where the Contemporary used to take over some of those aspects. Contemporary is a little bit more focused in other areas now. So I think it's a good symbiotic relationship, but I'm working with them a lot on the infrastructure improvements. So that's why I recommended it, because a lot of what my focus is in going there, like, for instance, site furnishings. We have a dozen benches, a dozen planters, and some trash receptacles that we're going to be siting. That's the first rollout of $200,000 worth of site furnishings that we're going to be doing through the district there, Peacedale, and some other areas in town. So we're working with them on that. The bridge was one of the projects. We redid all the railings along the river walk. So there's a lot of physical improvements, and if SS4A comes through, they would be a big player along with BPAC and other groups in that planning process, I would envision. So it's a good group. If you get a chance to attend, I highly recommend it.
I assume they're the ones who planned this evening's ladies' night in Wakefield.
Yes, I believe that they're the ones who do the ladies' night.
Actually,
Right?
it's actually Mel from Purple Cow, so she
okay,
she manages that. Yep.
I stand corrected. What was I going to say? Sorry, I lost the thought. It'll come back to me. Something along the lines of the WVA and some of the work activities there. But I know what it was. They do Zoom their meetings, so if you want to attend virtually, we can make the connection there so you can just get the link. And so if anybody wants to volunteer and just chime in, they are doing that as a convenience.
According to the website, the meetings are open to members only, and the individual membership is $50.
Yeah, I can tell you that's not the case.
Okay.
Anybody's welcome to attend, and I don't
Okay.
think, we can put whoever wants to volunteer. Rebecca, Rebecca Cook, they're very welcoming, and, they would ideally like people to join, but they're certainly not exclusive.
Okay, just wanted to mention that.
So Elizabeth, you're going to take the lead and notify when there are gaps in your ability to cover it and see if somebody else can go in your stead?
Yes.
Great, okay. New business. I think I already said that I had submitted just a quick communication with EDC and planning on the discussion of pedestrian movement and how the zoning and regulations can take that into account. And I cited a few, I shared it with everybody from the community comprehensive plan. So it's not just coming from us. I mean, this is something that the town council voted on and approved. And so I just wanted to kind of get our message out there that we support pedestrian movement with any new developments that are being planned. So does anybody have any comments on how, or what we should do, or how we can be involved in making sure that that is included?
Yeah, if I could, Dorothy, so could you clarify, did the council take an action, or did they say anything in particular about pedestrian movements? Like, what's the catalyst for us?
So it was, there was just a joint workshop. There was no catalyst for us. It was just, I just wanted to kind of get pedestrian movement into everybody's head, and that the BPAC was keeping an eye on this. So, but there was no opportunity for public comment, but there will be in the future. So we can look at that again as a group, if that's something that if we want to do.
Right, great. So I think, and we've talked about this over the last 7 years, and we've tried to figure out a way to co-join the planning department staff, the planning board, with the known boundaries that the planning board has with zoning laws as well. They can only compel developers, private property owners to do so much. And I think some of the prior philosophy of the BPAC was to say, we get that, and a perfect example is that massive development off of Old North Road. We being the town, tried to force them to do sidewalks. They pushed back, they went through the SHAB. It was upheld, so the developer won, but they came back and they acquiesced, and they've got some form of a sidewalk on their property that will serve pedestrians in the area. So it seems like that gap is well understood, that we can't compel, I forget the name of the subdivision, off of South Road, just north of Curtis Corner, beautiful little niche subdivision, but there are 0 sidewalks the instant you set foot on Northwoods on South Road. So we always looked at that as a debit. It ceased to become to be a developer responsibility, because laws don't support forcing developers to build town infrastructure off of, in different directions. So I like the idea of this conversation. How do you do it? And it being, how do you make those connections? And it's not trying to be argumentative with the developer or the role of the planning board or the planning department staff. It's really just to say, we get it, but as we're doing infill development and we're linking together all these folks, these properties, how do you get there, and who is responsible, or which department is responsible after that subdivision gets approved?
We had talked about this years ago, about Fieldstone Farms, and I'm not just the sidewalk, but we know that in the future, that is it Noise Farm, there's off of 138, the Parks and Rec have this plan to put trails back through there, or solidify the trails. They would come right up behind that development. And that development is also right in between 2 schools. And yet, if you live in that cul-de-sac, you have to walk out onto the road to get to one of the schools. You have to, if you're in the cul-de-sac, you have to walk somewhere to get to that path. And my comment or my suggestion was, is it possible for, through regulation, and I don't know that you can, but just to compel developers just to provide an easement between property lines, so that if there is a future trail or path or something, bike path, whatever, that you're already there. People in the community could enjoy that. So I know that some communities, and I don't know the name of it, but the one that's behind Curtis Corner, where you can come up behind the ball field and go through that community over to the other community, and without having to get on South Road. And those kinds of connections, I think, make it nicer and easier certainly for kids, but for anybody to enjoy walking and biking in the community.
Yeah, it makes sense. When I was on the planning board in the city of Cranston, there was one developer in particular that was very adamant about getting an approval for the subdivision. And because of their timeline, they acquiesced to allowing the planning board to impose an easement restriction on a part of their subdivision. But it was really, the city was out over its ski tips, and the developer accepted that modification so that they could walk away with their approval. So it makes perfect sense. I don't know how to do it. It's a legal issue. It's a planning issue. Yeah.
I think just bring it up and see if those with the knowledge can do anything about it, because we don't want to have developments that are cutting off pedestrian movement. We want people to be able to walk freely. They don't have to walk through the community, but there should be some access, so that these developments don't block.
I'm with you. And South County Commons example is another prime example of where the only reasonable remaining pathway would be through what's a private road, a private subdivision. And I don't think anybody, intentionally tried to do that, but that's the resultant concern that we have. You've got a low moderate income housing development going in. RIPTA doesn't go there. And folks that don't have access to, vehicles are going to be landlocked. They're going to try to walk through a private subdivision. So, yeah.
Just to clarify for me, this email letter that you've distributed, though, it cites the Community Comprehensive Plan adopted by the Town Council in 2021. So it has the policy number and then it has an action number. Are these actionable items that the town can enforce?
So I'll put on my former planning hat. So comprehensive plans are general in nature, and when you make your finding of facts on approvals, it's referenced. It's required by state law that you reference it. So when you're on a planning board, you probably had to make certain findings, right? And there's about 5 findings of fact. You have access to a right-of-way, and making sure that there's sort of basic findings that go along with it. Interpretive, comprehensive plans can be interpreted a number of ways. It's looser language, so it's intentionally broad. The difficulty is, as Ken said, is when you start compelling somebody with private property to say, you need to provide X. It's their private property. You have development review authority, but you can only compel so much, and that has to be based in some sort of grounded law or regulation, right? So development regulations typically state if you want a public roadway, or if you're proposing a public roadway, it has to be designed in a certain way. However, as we know, there's a lot of private developments in town. And so they become exempted from those development regulations, so now they don't have sidewalks because they're the ones plowing them, they're the ones maintaining them, which was a kind of a shift many decades ago because towns said, great, we don't, we're getting the same amount of taxes and we don't have to plow the roads and maintain the roads. The fallout from that is loss of control. So, the inability to require those types of things. So I think Ken hit the nail on the head. It's complex. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but it would be really planning board trying to look at the zoning and the development regulations and figuring out ways to change those in such ways that it would be legal to be able to at least try to compel compliance in those areas, like getting those connections done. A lot of times they're kind of, lack of better terms, side deals. So when I was a planner, you would go and you'd say, listen, this would go much better, and your timeline would go much better if I could go to the planning board and say we could get some public access and do some things for the public benefit. And sometimes developers will play ball and they're like all in. However, there are those who are just like, who don't want public access because they're private developments, and sometimes they say, I don't want people traversing through the neighborhood. And that sounds abstract to us because we're like, well, why wouldn't you want it? Some people don't want people in their neighborhoods. Some people love cul-de-sacs for that reason, and they don't want outsiders. So what's logical to you is not always logical to a developer. So what can you do? I mean, I'm just putting on my advice cap. I don't really know. I think communicating these issues to the planning board and saying this is important and look out for them and do the best you can within the legal confines that you have to try to work with developers to make these accommodations. And I think as an advisory committee, that's what you can do, my opinion. But I think that's kind of where your lane sits.
With it being a significant issue in the last few years in regards to the plowing and maintenance of private roads in the town, have there been any requests to turn roads over to the town and then they would have to meet town standards for such a turnover to occur?
So I can't speak to specifics. I know that we've had people inquiring about it, but typically, because the roads were built in such a understandard, lack of standards way, where they don't have sidewalks, they don't have the drainage, they don't have the pavement depth, they don't have all the things that we would require. It's often very expensive for somebody to meet that standard. Doesn't mean they can't do it and they can't request it, but we would probably issue we would have to have the standard brought up on those roadways. Most of the time, those developments balk because they don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars upgrading those roadways. So what you find is, what we found, most of people, overall, it's, I wouldn't say it's going smooth. We have received pushback, and we have a couple lawsuits on this issue. But as far as the private road issue, but we haven't had many requests to
Convert to public.
convert. And it's usually a money issue. The cost to plow
Oh,
is
sure.
much less than to convert to a public roadway.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this one example, the place just north of Wakefield, I don't think they're looking to convert their property and to open it up for public access. So even though the road may meet the town requirements, I don't think they're looking to have, like, I rode my bike through there. I felt like people were looking at me. They probably were. So. Mrs. Kravitz, right.
So this is just discussion here. I don't think there's anything that we need to do make any action on, but I guess I just want some clarification from Luke. Do we reach out to the planning board and, general, say this is what we're looking at, this is pedestrian movement, citing different policies or actions, or are we looking at each development and making suggestions?
So my suggestion, Ken knows this, like, you've gone down the lane of individual developments, and I don't think it was taken well, if I'm being blunt.
I don't think
Be-
we ever did anything with it.
No, but you started down that road, and I think the planning board was aware of it, and there was one specific project I remember that there was a developer raising red flags of, okay, now I'm subject to review by the BPAC, and it created a bit of a kerfuffle with the planning board. And so, and that, this is what happens, right? Because if developers are already subject to a lot of reviews that are legally binding. And so when other groups come in, they're concerned about their project going off track. And so it raises red flags. My recommendation would be, in general, if you want to, you can certainly voice your opinions to the planning board. However, always go back to my set of guiding light here. Your advisory to council, you can also put it on their radar that we feel these things are being missed by the planning board. It's not an offense to them, but this is things that you should be also talking to the planning board about. And we feel that, as the appointing authority for the membership, these things should be important and on their radar. That doesn't mean you can't communicate with the planning board and offer up your opinion. I personally would recommend that you do not start weighing in on individual projects. I think it's better that you issue your concerns in a broad base, that they can look through that lens of broad base on all projects and take your opinions into account, because every project is different and there's complexities of it. To Ken's earlier point, Fieldstone Farms, that one, when they're going for a comprehensive permit on affordable housing, especially since affordable housing is such a big issue right now, things like pedestrian accessibility are low on the totem pole for these developers, right? So they're more worried about compact development and getting as much packed in as they can. And when they go for a comp permit and they get that approval, there's only so much latitude the town has. So I think putting it broadly to the planning board of saying we think these things are getting missed, you need to look out for them. Maybe at earlier stages, they can put it on the radar and say, oh, you know what, we are seeing a misconnection here, we need to address this. But, council is also an avenue, whether they listen or not, that's up to them, but your advisory to council, certainly put it on their radar as well. And take that advice for its worth. You asked me, I'm giving the answer, so.
I don't think we ever got off the ground with, we talked about some of the developments and suggestions that we would make, but we never spoke to anybody at the planning board. We were never given an opportunity to do that. So that wasn't from us, that we were trying to get in there and be part of any, it was just suggestions, nothing that would be binding. Just, have you thought of this?
Yeah, I know
That's
what
it.
the intent was, and I think just even being on the agenda had raised red flags.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I'm just offering that up.
Okay.
Like, this is what I was hearing from the back end of, boy, this is, seems overstepped.
I didn't know
And that's
anybody was
not,
looking at our
so that we're,
agendas.
hey, it's a public document, right? And when you've got millions of dollars in a development on the line, you're going to get red flags, so.
All right, moving on. So at what point, and I've seen this, in discussion in some of the other committees, do we have an opportunity to make recommendations on the next CIP? And how does that work?
The next CIP will be starting to be drafted August, September. We typically start in September with the early planning process. I will say this. So September was when we really start generating and getting things together. It's adopted in December. Between September and December, we're in active mode of trying to receive recommendations from the departments and what capital needs are. And capital needs range, right? That's not just roadways, it's cars, it's certain types of software, it's computer. It's anything that would have an extended useful life. And the benefit being our funds carry over year to year on capital funds. I say that because it's competitive and a portion goes to roadways. So if you want to weigh in on the plan, there are public hearings on the capital plan, and that would be the time to weigh in. The roadway projects are on there and included in that, and I know it's an imperfect process, right? And I know, it's like you got to hit it just right. But I would urge you, we don't do a lot of additions. Like, we might identify a couple more roadways we're going to pave. Like, I'll give you, for instance, coming up, which is very important, is that Rich is going to council on Monday to award for a pavement management plan. Beta Engineering is suggested as the awarded vendor, and it's the first time we're really going to have an assessment done of all town roads and now that's not pedestrian oriented, it is condition of roadways. But having a data-driven mechanism to base our capital plan on, so when people say, why not my road, we can point to the plan and say, well, we know based on visual our assessment internally that we think it needs to be done, but based on this independent assessment that graded roadways in different categories, this is what we came out with, and this is why it's in the capital plan. So we've been in support of it, and Rich is moving in that direction. So why is that important? It's likely that based on that plan, you're going to see roadways come up for repaving. We primarily, under the capital plan, repave. There are things like Kersey Road is under design for a sidewalk, because that was pushed, and we committed some money to do sidewalk design. But we have no money right now for the actual construction. That would have to come in future capital cycles. So what I would suggest is you don't have to wait. Take the current capital plan as it sits. It's a 6-year plan, which means that many of the things that are included this year are not going to be even done till 6, maybe 8 years, because a lot of things get pushed out, because we only get a couple $1 million a year in capital funding. That does not go very far. For reference, just that section of Old North Road that's going to get repaved in place is $500,000. So Old North Road in total, I think, was about $1 million. And that's just a repave. That's not a significant enhancement. It's repave. So, but start looking at that now, and I think what I would do is identify what roads are on that list and any concerns you have at those roads, and then make your recommendations, because it's not just now, it's 6 years from now. So if you want to see funding bolstered for one of those projects, then we're not necessarily opposed to it. We'll do whatever the council asks. You're advisory to council. So you're like, these roadways are on your 6-year plan. We really feel that sidewalks, crosswalks, whatever, need to be included as part of this to make it more robust. And that would be a recommendation. That would come in the capital cycle, so they can start thinking about, okay, maybe we're not doing it this year, but Rich, can you include these other things or plan for it? So it's not a perfect science. It's not, I'm not going to make any qualms about it. It's not a process where it's built for robust public input. It is built for input, but you got to kind of know what you want to provide, and knowing that we're under a kind of a restriction as far as how much we allocate. So does that make sense? You have questions? Is that clear enough?
You did a good job.
Okay.
So it sounds like a task for this committee is to look at the capital plan, the individual roadway plans that are, or infrastructure plans that are in the queue, and start to provide specific recommendations and repeat those recommendations every year until the project is done.
You're tracking. Yep.
And I'd add to that, timing-wise, I think, as I understand you, getting our suggestions to Rich earlier, like before September, makes sense. Let him understand if it's 5,000 or 10,000 or a much larger number. Again, the low to no cost enhancements are what I think we're trying to convey. And I think the sooner he knows about those opportunities, the better. Otherwise, once the town departments roll up all of their individual requests through you and through the town manager, I mean, the cake is baked. There's never enough money. And the manager has to produce that pro forma budget by, it's like before, by November. So, we don't have a lot of time. So,
Luke, can you send us the website where we can, the specific website where we can each review the CIP as it exists right now?
It's on our website.
It is on the website?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just on our
If you
drive.
if you go to, under our main page, under budgets, town council budget, it's under there, but we can certainly send you the link. Ken made a good point, though, right now, because I'm thinking in terms of larger roadways, but one thing to think about, and I have talked to Rich about, and we've already started this, the larger issue we're hearing is not so much bike pedestrian, if I'm being honest, right? We don't have people beating down our doors saying we need more bike lanes. I mean, I appreciate your group, but that's not what I'm hearing through the emails and what council is hearing. The larger issue is speeding, and we hear a lot on that. And as you heard from Green Hill, that's the big issue. So we have seeded an account this year, at end of year, and I've encouraged Rich to start thinking in this direction of small things we can do, whether it be, to Ken's point, there's a lot you can do with striping. There's a lot you can do, speed feedback signs and small improvements that we can do to start addressing this on roadways, right? And I think in that same vein, maybe making that suggestion that, hey, instead of going road by road and saying, Old North Road should have this and, Robinson should have that, is saying, you guys have talked a number of times about low-cost improvements. We could have a capital account. We don't right now, but have a capital account where it's more of a reserve account that's meant for those type of generalized items where we could pull from. So it doesn't have to be assigned to a roadway, assigned to a specific thing. It's more of every year we're putting in, let's say, $25,000 into an account. And when these things come up, Rich has latitude then to say, okay, we feel that, it's an appropriate use of those funds to restripe or add striping or do a crosswalk in a certain way or, et cetera, small, low-cost stuff. I don't think we're opposed to it, and Rich is much more flexible on that. Where we've hit hurdles is the funding avenue, but I think, we're in the mindset of trying to carve out some funding for those types of things. And we'll be working in that direction this year. So I think, if you're going to focus on something, supporting that would be helpful as we go through the process, and I'll keep you advised on that.
So I think maybe at our next meeting in August, we'll take a look at it, and everybody can look at it at their leisure, and then we can make suggestions and work on, some kind of communication, if that's okay. Okay, so we'll do that I think that'll be our big August discussion. Okay, so we're at new business G. I don't know if I've labeled these correctly, but anyway, in May, let's see, it's a Block Island Sound Bikeway Committee in Charlestown hosted a a ride through Matunic Schoolhouse Road, big loop. It was very nice. I think there were maybe 10 of us. And they asked if we would like to host, if BPAC would like to host a casual ride in October. And I think they were suggesting the first weekend in October, and I will not be around. So does that sound like anything that we can do? And all it really involves is just kind of getting the word out and putting on, yellow or orange colored clothing and riding a loop.
I'll just have a reaction for legal purposes to the term hosting. That makes you responsible for, but I think if we could be participants in it, it means we don't own the ride.
How did they handle it?
It was a committee ride, and they have done it for several years. And there really wasn't anything monetarily. It was just an organizational map that went out to people that they know. It was, maybe the thing is, it's not a BPAC thing. Maybe it's a Dorothy Hill thing or somebody else. Just doesn't have to necessarily be BPAC, but I didn't see why it couldn't be.
I see the community effort in it. It's just the word. That's all, the only reason. Fully support being there, participating, joining in, and as a community with an adjacent town's committee and in the activity. I just wouldn't ever publish that we're hosting it. That's the only reason I say saying participants in is fine. It has a different level of ownership. That's all I was getting at.
And I also, it rings a bell, but I don't know what the triggers are, because I know we have rides that go through the town. They typically have to go to town council because they're larger. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I don't deal with that end of it, but the clerk does. I could check with her, but I think it's a fair point that when you start getting into hosting, and I know it's a small event, but these things matter. Somebody gets hit, and there's, well, you hosted this event and things like that. So I think it's a fair point. I would recommend, one recommendation might be a joint ride, through SK, and it's just two groups getting together informally to kind of have it, I understand what your intent is, and I can get a little bit more from the clerk if there would be a trigger there, but, I mean, all I can offer is I do think maybe it's a fair point.
Yeah, I did communicate with one of the police officers in May, before this ride, because I was asking, can they put some cones out, or do they want to ride with us? I mean, that might be something if the police want to. They have a bicyclist. They have a crew, too, I think. I mean, that might be something we could ask if they would like to sponsor it.
So, why don't we talk offline? Give me a call, and I'll do a little homework and see if we can get you where you want to be.
Okay.
All right?
Is anybody interested in riding?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay. It's a pretty nice ride. Okay, and that pretty much recurring discussion topics. Does anybody looking on here have any thoughts on work on the master plan, updating it? I know I said that I was going to take a crack at it. I just haven't had a chance. Collaborating with other committees. Does anybody, have an interest in being our liaison, checking in with the police department maybe once a month, or planning, or Parks and Rec, or school, or any of the other committees, and just kind of checking to see what they're working on, if there's anything that we can work on together. And then I think that's it. We've talked about developments already. Anybody?
I'll be willing to look at there are multiple committees in this town and see which ones I might be interested in sitting in on, so that there's an awareness between committees as to what's going on and just some feedback, but I'll be doing it as an individual with awareness of what this committee does. But I'll look at it and provide you input at the next meeting.
I'm not certain about doing it monthly, but as a quarterly basis, that would be more in my timeline.
And my past recollection was that we would screen their agendas, to be honest with you, and if there was something that was relevant to our mission, sometimes that was worthwhile to consider. Usually that was related to the planning department or planning board, occasionally the EDC or the rec commission. So I think I've run out of bandwidth to volunteer for other assignments, so I'm happy to review things. So I review things often. I can share thoughts.
I don't think I'd ever hear you say that.
We'll get worn down. But if I could, on the theme of the BPAC and the master plan. So the BPAC previously looked at the body of work we did as a moment in time. We did what we said we would do. We held public comment, a couple of public meetings. We updated the council. They didn't directly endorse it. They acknowledged it, I guess. So I think it's aged, so it's static. So I don't know what is appropriate or necessary for the BPAC moving forward as far as a body of work that we lean on. And Luke, this may go back to some of the prior thoughts about hiring consultants, something that's more professionally developed. And you guys have been doing multiple iterations of that. Sometimes fits and starts with opera money, but then not having enough time to go through on it. Is there any other town sponsored interest to advance bicycle and pedestrian activity as a document?
For us?
Yeah.
Short answer is no. And it's not for lack of wanting the plans, but we have so much going on. I can tell you that staff is running on 110% between all the projects. We came out of ARPA, and we're building an EMS station, OMF. We're building a community learning center. We've got roadway projects. For the amount of staff we have, and planning projects have fallen behind, like Old Tower Hill Road, right? You haven't heard about that in a while. We still have to get the form-based zoning for that, right? But we got development regulations and all this other stuff. We got to update the comprehensive plan. So to take on another plan right now, I'm just being honest, is probably not in our, I think you're going to get more traction if you dig in on some of the smaller projects that we think are tangible, like take the small wins. So I know that's not the comprehensive look that everyone necessarily wants to do, but we have the SS4A plan now. We have a number of plans that came out of ARPA. We have things that, you just talked about the capital plan, and I think we're all on board. You talked about the school and that surrounding area. I would suggest we focus more on those bite-sized elements where we can really make some action and show some improvement. And then maybe when things settle down a bit, then we can reset and say, okay, maybe we look at the total picture. But I would suggest, what I've been kicking around my mind, and Rich has brought this to me too, is we kept talking about that $300,000 whatever in bond money, and we talked originally okay, we've kind of shifted on that. All right, do we do a mobility plan? And then the SS4A came up, and we said, all right, we'll wait until we end up with that. And now we've got some good actionable items out of that. And so Rich has come to me and said, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could use the $300,000 to just start implementing some of those things? And that's something I was going to bring to the BPAC of saying, okay, and I feel bad because I know we've run a circle on this of saying, well, do we plan? What do we use it for, right? But we got to kind of settle on something because that money's sitting there, and it could be actually put to good use if we want to on some of these elements. So you mentioned about the capital plan and the low-hanging fruit. That's one of the things that Rich was looking at of saying, hey, do we want to start using that? So I don't want to talk about that tonight. It's something we can put on a future agenda. I might even ask that it be put on a future agenda and ask Rich to attend a meeting on this. But I do think that money is still there. You could feasibly go to council and say, and I'm just making a recommendation here. You can always go to council. I want to be very clear on this because you're your own group. You can go to council and say, we really want to undertake a bicycle pedestrian master plan, like a professionally done one. You have this $300,000 and we want council to endorse that. That's within your purview. You can, whether they take it up or not, that's up to them. But I'm just saying that our capacity, even if it's approved by council, on the far end would be difficult to take on right now. And so, I just want to set reasonable expectations.
Not to hold you to it too quickly, though, I said it would be good to invite Rich to one of these meetings. Would August be a reasonable time frame so that we are prepared before CIP and what inputs we might provide?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly ask Rich if he's available that night. Yeah, I don't think it's an unreasonable. He's usually willing to participate. He used to staff this.
Sure. Would the committee approve that?
Yes.
Dorothy, just add it to my list of things that we need to talk about, okay?
I can invite.
Well, I want,
Yeah, okay.
Heads up.
yeah, I'll drop that one out.
Anything else that anybody wants to bring up? Anything that you want to add to the next?
If I could add something under the new issues.
Okay.
Like I received a request today to put in front of the committee in regards to High Street itself, pedestrian crossings. And so I drove down it this evening coming here, and this is a resident up towards the north end there. There are two crossings basically on the same block. One of them near, I'll throw myself back there and call it Giros. It's now Terminices, I guess, that there's one there in the vicinity, and then there is a short distance near Church Street. There is a crosswalk. That crosswalk leads to the side of Church Street that does not have a sidewalk. So it leads to where there had been a store there, a garage or such, but there's no sidewalk. So you've got somebody crossing the street that then has to cross where there's no crosswalk to get to the sidewalk on Church Street. But those two on the north end and the crosswalk here in front of the church next door are the sole crosswalks on High Street. That's quite an expanse for people to try and get from the neighborhoods across High Street to the side of the street where there is the sidewalk on the town side of it. If I put it as a new item for discussion at the next meeting, ask the person to come forward, because this is a person who pushes a baby stroller and basically has to jaywalk to get across High Street. And if it were an examination of where there are the curb cuts that are ADA compliant and where we could have, you think of it as key things like Allen's Avenue, a key connecting road where traffic comes through. Do we have the curb cuts there? Or the streets adjacent where you have a sidewalk that leads to High Street and there's no designated crossing point on High Street? If it's, again, talking about if it's low cost, if it's the striping to highlight a crosswalk, that should be looked at along High Street.
I have a question. Are they discussing curb cuts, or are they discussing actual drawn?
Actual drawn crosswalks.
Only drawn crosswalks,
but I'm
not
saying
curb cuts.
it left me thinking if there is the opportunity for more crosswalks where you have the supporting curb cut, can it be looked into to provide the striping to get the crosswalks that are a bit more frequent, not all the way from Church Street to the church next door here as being that kind of a gap on crosswalks?
So I just want to put this out, because this has come across in my brain in different areas, not in South Kingstown, but in other areas. My question is are you truly jaywalking when there's an ADA compliant curb cut, and when you need to walk across a street, the side streets which normally never have crosswalks? Are you truly jaywalking? I don't think so.
That's how
I
the-
think I would make that argument, that you're not jaywalking.
You shouldn't have to make the argument is the
So
key is, and there should be, we talk about recognizing the pedestrian's right if you put the striping in, recognizing and reinforcing the pedestrian's right to get across a street.
I agree that we should have that, but if a town is, or a state is, doesn't have the funds for all of those stripings, because if you've talked with Rich, he'll be like, oh yeah, every time I do a striping, it's this amount. You do that by 500, and there goes my budget. My big question is, and this is just a question, I'm putting that out there. I agree that they probably need those crosswalks, just like there's a bunch of places that we need the rapid responding flashing beacons. I agree with that. But, and I think that those are, and High Street is a state road, so that's really out of our, that's out of our purview. That's just number one, out of our purview. But with that being said, is it truly jaywalking if there's an ADA compliant curb cut? I'm not positive about that.
Apologize, I did not realize it's a state road that's not
High
numbered.
Street, when it was only done, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. It is a state road, and so it really wouldn't be something, it would have to go through the State Traffic Commission and the whole bit. And knowing that it was redone, not long ago, I don't know. I know that, listen, Rich is on the same boat. Mid-block crosswalks are a difficult thing in general, so the more you have doesn't make it safer. So, and by that I mean you can have, we went through this in the discussion on Kersey Road. You can have 5 crossings, but you're assuming that makes it necessarily safer. Sometimes it actually makes it worse, right? Because people just it becomes a blend. So I know that they're very cautious about, judicious about where they place them, because you could feasibly have, a dozen locations that for anybody is more convenient. So Ken, you have experience with DOT, you can speak to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on this, and this is kind of, well, first of all, Neil, I support the interest in having the conversation. I don't know where to go, because it probably will get directed through Rich and the chief as to whether or not they want to take it over to the State Traffic Commission. But going through that process of being interested in the state's redesign of High Street, I do remember talking with John Schock. I think Rich was here at the time as well as a town engineer, looking at what the town used to call the loop, and it was their loop of where they plowed certain sidewalks on Main Street, High Street, I think Church Street, going down Columbia. It was just what they could do with the resources they had. That also gave rise to specific crosswalks that helped tie together critical sidewalks for mostly the school-age children that had to walk to school. So I think that's some backstory. Some of it might be folklore, might not be entirely accurate. Things have changed, and the BPAC did ask Rich many years ago for a listing of all the crosswalks, and that was kind of a sticky wicket. We were really trying to understand, how things came to be, not why they are the way they are, just how did it happen, and knowing that there are design constraints, it's not reasonable to think that we can keep on adding crosswalks, but it at least forces the conversation. Well, how do people from this neighborhood get to school, or to the shopping area? So it's the beginning of a discussion.
Yeah, I brought it up in the case of looking at places where there are the existing ADA curb cuts, so that the singular issue, or the issue drills down to striping and a crosswalk sign. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a full curb cut, repave, it's a striping and a sign.
So, yeah, I'm all for that. I just wanted to make sure that I just don't know if it came to be me being ticketed, I would fight it just because it's a curb cut. That's just saying.
So it sounds like take this to the, perhaps contact the police chief with the concept and take it to the State Traffic Commission?
Well, so, pause. I would, if the group wants to take it up and make some sort of recommendation, then, you know, in addition, I think Rich, you know, even though it's a state roadway, you know, we all play in the sandbox, like I want to make sure it's kind of run through both the chief and Rich and saying this is the proposal because, you know, it's part of a larger roadway network, right? And other things like what you do for one, the next roadway over wants. This is the same thing with the speed, right? If you start doing speed humps, the next road wants it, and the next road wants it, speed feedback signs, et cetera. So it's a larger picture for us of, you know, how far this goes. I know that is not necessarily fair, and maybe in your eyes, you're like, I want to put some stripes down. But there are larger ripples to every decision we make, trust me. You know, for everything we do we think is a help, there's another problem that pops up because of it. So if you want to meet and discuss it and really identify locations, I would then bring it to the chief and Rich and say, here's what the BPAC is discussing as a recommendation. What's the thought? And then it's something that, you know, we want to take it up to the State Traffic Commission. Because the other piece of this, and I'll just say, we have a lot of requests. And every time we go to the State Traffic Commission, it's another thing, it's another thing, it's another thing, right? So there's only so many chips you throw in the basket. And how much many, you know, so you start watering that down as like, geez, South Kingstown's in here every single meeting on something. And that, I know that doesn't sound fair either, but there's 39 cities and towns with issues. So it's the realities of what we deal with. So that's my helpful advice here is let's run it through administration and see, I can get some feedback for you on the concerns.
How about we take it, I mean, if it's all right with the committee, I'll bring back to the committee recommendations for the committee to view for the concept and then see about going to the chief of police and to town manager to let them know of the concerns and specific recommendations.
I mean, I work in the town manager's office. He sits 5 feet away from me, so, you
Yeah.
know, he'll be aware. They'll be in the loop.
Okay.
I'm part of that process, trust me. And it's not to block you, it's to, again, to my earlier conversation.
Oh,
we
I
need to
hear
be-
your
we need to be
concerns
on-
and your
What I also
points.
don't want is the chief to be in the awkward position of saying, you know, this request comes in, and quite honestly, I got a director who's saying, you know, that's not my opinion. And I don't want you to take it. We're lucky enough to have him as a representative on the State Traffic Commission, but just because he's there doesn't mean that's the mechanism for everyone to go through and start making requests. I guess that's my point. You know, we're very lucky to have him, and he's very active, but not every city and town has that. And so I don't want to start using him as a vehicle for every request we have. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I mean, my meeting with the State Traffic Committee was not as a member of the committee. It was not through the town. It was as a citizen of
Sure.
the town.
Yeah, you can do that.
And if the town is sensitive to that, I'll advise the individual as well. But I'll bring recommendations, if all right, to this committee to show you the points of concern. If the committee opts not to, I can advise the individual to go to the state directly and get their own neighborhood petitions or whatever to help support their case as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. They can do that. That's within their rights, and they, as a resident, I encourage it. Go. You know, I'm just saying as part of a body here,
Sure.
that it creates some complexities, right? We work in unison. Any individual as a private citizen, resident of the town, they can work within the systems they have, absolutely.
All right, I think that brings us to the end. So, next meeting in August, what is the date for the next meeting?
Like the 11th,
Let's see.
14th.
Okay, August the 14th is the next meeting, and we have plenty to discuss. We'll just kind of go through, I think Lisa, Beth, and I'll kind of go through this and mark where we said we were going to continue the discussion. All righty. Anybody have anything else? Any other comments?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all approved?
Thank you, Dorothy.